Welcome to Shelf Help. Today we're speaking with Mike Fransz, Director of Marketing at Nova Naturals, the parent to CTO Pure Coconut Water, Steaz, Mineragra. Nova Naturals is owned by Novamex, the Mexican beverage house that owns additional brands like the infamous Jarritos is probably the one that probably most familiar with. Mike originally honed his chops at Red Bull and then led marketing at brands like Neuro Brands, Swell Foods before landing at Nova Naturals. So a lot of really great experience in the space and really excited to get into it. Mike, maybe just first off for listeners that aren't that familiar with Nova Naturals, quick lay of the land in terms of maybe origin story, kind of when the company started and brought all the brands together, and then the core brands under the umbrella. You can just kind of reiterate them a bit more. I know I kind of gave them at a high level, and then we'll go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, no worries. So Nova Naturals was formed as a division of Greater Novamex, as you mentioned, Adam. Novamex, our parent company, has three separate divisions. We have a classic Hispanic groceries division. We have a conventional drinks division, which is most known for the Jarritos line of sodas. And 5 years ago, we formed Nova Naturals. Nova Naturals was essentially the naturals business unit for Greater Novamex. And so the focus there was idea there was really to have a team of people focused on natural, not just the natural channel, but natural brands, and allowing those brands to be supported and developed in the marketplace. And it's kind of a nice thing because it's one big matrix. Novamex was originally created out of partnerships, and there's a great team of people there that manage everything from sales, finance, operations, production, etc. But for Nova Naturals, we focus on really C2O and Steaz right now. Those are our two main brands. But really, Novamex had purchased into Steaz and also into C2O. And so we formed a business unit around the Naturals division. They also purchased TO. With TO's a few challenges coming out of COVID with that brand. Low awareness on gazpacho, and then also, the challenges post-COVID, the world was very different, right? So the need, the desire, the routes to market, and the way that we were planning the market, it was a challenge. So not saying you won't see anything out on TO, but we are looking at other ways to bring value through that brand. But for now, our main focus is C2O and Steaz, which we're doing an excellent job with and just continuing to grow year over year.
Well, perfect. You've spent, I think, 25-ish years in the food and beverage space, which, I think so much has evolved. Even like you said, things change even just between pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Totally.
It was like 25 years or so. Like what kind of, I'm just kind of curious what jumps out in terms of things that have really kind of fundamentally changed about how brands win today versus when you started.
I mean, if you're not evolving, you're dying, right? And like the whole game has changed quite a bit. I mean, 25 years, I mean, you're seeing huge shifts, right? So just within the natural food sector, let's just take that for a second. Natural foods has really become mainstream. Whereas like before 30, when I was a kid, I mean, shoot, when I was a kid, you'd go down to the local natural food store, and if you wanted something really unique and different, that's where you got your vitamins and some of these things, right? Your organic products. They weren't available in large conventional grocery stores. You weren't even seeing it as menu options in restaurants. Like, there's a huge seismic shift that's occurred where natural has become mainstream, right? I mean, one of your largest organic retailers in the world is Costco. It's unbelievable, right? So like you've seen huge shifts in assortment at Walmart. You've seen huge shifts in assortment at Target. You're seeing it day in, day out in Kroger and other fine retailers nationwide. So like there's been a huge shift in natural. It's also been a huge awareness lift in what types of products people prefer. And, the unique thing about the products today is like people can be very specialized in what their need states are, and there's a fix and function naturally for a lot of different things. So people are experimenting on the consumer side, which is interesting, right? Because you really have a proliferation of communication information that has taken place all due to the internet. I mean, prior to 1998, I don't even think there was an internet, right? I got my first email, right? And, graduating UCLA, and went to work at Red Bull, and I was working there and got had an email for the first time. I was like, what the heck is that? And shortly after, we got cell phones. I mean, they weren't even small cell phones. They were just ginormous freaking pieces of phone, and we kind of laughed, but the information age has really changed things with consumers. It's also changed things as far as brands go. You're seeing not just other changes that you're seeing, just our general marketplace stuff that we probably take for granted. I mean, who knew at the time, a few years later, Amazon, a bookseller, would turn into one of the largest retailers in the world, right? And lead the way in online shopping after the .com bust, right? So you're seeing huge changes in the way that people go to market. And then it's not just Amazon, right? I mean, there's a whole Instacart revolution and DoorDash and Amazon Now. And as if Amazon 2-day Prime wasn't enough, you can now have it in an hour. It's this instant gratification, right? So there's a little bit of a shift in consumers too, right? So consumers are used to instant gratification. They're used to having a voice now because of social media. They're used to having, things quick, easy, simplified. So, but they're also wicked smart. Consumers are super smart, right? And so the one thing that's interesting though is you've seen these shifts, right? You've seen this seismic shift, if you would, in better for you and natural, right? That's one thing that I saw. But then you also saw online shopping change. And you also saw social media, right? It used to be when I was at Red Bull my first year, there wasn't such a thing as an influencer.
Totally.
Influencer is a freaking job now. That's unbelievable, know? And, the way that the world is, it's not about A-list celebrities anymore. Yep. It's that people, really YouTube has democratized, the production value of entertainment into the form of every man's entertainment, every woman's entertainment, every person's entertainment. Whatever your view is, whatever your thing is, you have the potential to be an influencer. Now, when I was first at Red Bull, we were this unique brand, right? So this brand, no one even knew what an energy drink was when I was hired at Red Bull. I think my number at Red Bull was number 152. It was the first of 5 college ambassadors for them. And then they basically hired me right out of college. And, here's me. I'm 23 years old. Here's other folks at the time that are 35, 40 years old, significantly older than me, maybe 10, 15 years older than me. Classically trained in marketing, but here's the kid that learned marketing not as a history major at UCLA. I learned marketing outside through internships and events and activities and consumer driven activities around products. And I got hired by Red Bull as a college ambassador and learned marketing even more. And it really got me excited about product and how to bring it to market and how really to get this product market fit, right? So for us at Red Bull, it was kind of interesting in that there wasn't necessarily influencers, but we called them opinion leaders, right? We called them opinion leaders because you all knew who the cool kid was in your region that hung out at the local skate shop. You knew who the top surfer was in the region who was winning and the one that everyone looked up to. Maybe not all the ones with the trophies that do it competitively, but the one that's the opinion leader within the group.
Yeah.
So at Red Bull, we were trained and taught how to filter through and look for influencers, if you would, but they're really they're opinion leaders, but it came down to simple things. One, do they know what Red Bull is? Is there a genuine love for the brand? 2, do they have influence in and around their community? And 3, are they genuine and credible? Right? Now, some of these things still hold true today, right? Because when you really think about total product market fit, there's ways that you can do things smarter today. Yes, because of technology.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you have to have a great product. You have to be able to communicate what it is. You have to be able to communicate the value that it represents to someone, right? And like you can get very granular today on targeting some of these markets, which is great. But back then, when we were looking at the market, there were some just simple things that occurred to us, right? It's like we knew who the music influencers were in our region. I grew up, I didn't manage it on a national level. I managed it on a regional level, like in Orange County. So Orange County, California, really started, building that brand in, 2000. I was in northern Los Angeles County of Mammoth Mountain, Burbank, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. And it's really interesting. Like that first territory of mine before I got Orange County was really interesting because it had this unique area. If you know anything about San Fernando Valley, it's all tied in with Burbank and entertainment land, right? But then you've also got Ventura, which is like a little bit more of an agricultural and like seafaring town. And then you've got Santa Barbara, which is a little bit more elitist and part of this like biking triathlon at the time that was occurring, right? So like San Luis Obispo, there's not much difference in San Luis Obispo being an agricultural town than there is in other parts of agricultural areas across the country. So it's kind of like cool microcosm. And then there was Mammoth Mountain, which was the premier snow mountain probably on the West Coast, one of them, And so it was really cool because as a young marketer, I got to really understand and learn about some of these unique populations. But what it was teaching me was, how to connect consumers across these different demographics. And how do you make these small towns come to life? And really, it was kind of interesting because at the end of the day, the one thing that has not changed, I would say, is product market fit. Your product has to be able to provide value to the consumers that you're working with or working, in every day.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're part of that community, right? And, there were endemic communities, right? So like the skateboarders all hung out with skateboarders and surfers hung out with surfers. And that became X Games and everybody kind of came together and started doing their own thing. But like, what's really interesting is today is those same people exist, but they exist online. The filter is literally a little bit more of an aperture, if you would, right? Not just what you're looking around in your community. Now you're looking around online. You're looking at the different creative talent online. You're looking at how they connect with their consumers. What are the values that they have? Do they represent, your brand? So it was pretty interesting. I think those would be the four main things that I kind of put down as like, when you asked me this question earlier, I was like, gosh, that's a really good question, man. But for me, it's like this shift in natural to mainstream, which that's why I left Red Bull, right? Like, I really felt like I got really good. Like, when I first started at Red Bull, we were doing about 1,500 cases a month. When I left Red Bull 7 years later, this is just in Orange County, we were doing 150,000 cases a month.
Wow.
And we completely 10x'd our business. So it was absolutely unbelievable, right? But and it wasn't just a me thing. We had a whole team of people around it and some really great distributors and really great, programming to really make the thing go. At the end of the day, the product worked, right? But why I left Red Bull was I really felt a disconnect in my heart of hearts of like what I was doing and the product. I didn't really feel like it fit my life as much as I had wanted it to originally when I was 23. So I left. And I also started seeing that natural products were really moving in a different direction.
Yeah.
And so for me, I made that decision to jump on that natural product train and really kind of do something a little bit different. I love Red Bull. I love the people at Red Bull. I love the culture at Red Bull. I love what Red Bull represents and does. Probably not the best beverage for me day in, day out. Just going to say it. But man, I had some of the best experiences of my life with some of the best people in the industry there. It was a great place to work and learn and develop. But really think they were forward thinking even before social media on who are the different opinions, who are the main consumers, how does our product fit into their daily lives, how do we create um, ways to communicate and ways to intercept and launch trial and awareness campaigns uh, in a way that is genuine, in a way that is like different, right? And we can get to the scalability in a second. I know you had a question on scalability, so we can talk about that. But it's so interesting the way that it prepared me for the greater marketing
Yeah.
to be done.
At that point, I mean, I think, yeah, Red Bull's become, I mean, one of the most well-known, well-respected brands in the world. And it seems like, you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like one of the key ways that they've done that is just having a really well-run, well-organized field marketing org. Like, I think about Red Bull. I think about those, the Red Bull branded Mini Coopers that like drive around everywhere, like the places that
Yeah.
they need to be. And like, I'm kind of curious just from, yeah, what were some of your biggest takeaways in terms of how to build like a really well-run kind of field marketing org? And then how do you scale it up to the scale that Red Bull has gotten to today, where it still seems like it's very well organized?
Yeah, I think everybody would love to say, yeah, Red Bull can do it, we can do it too. And that's just not the truth.
Right.
It's not easy to do what Red Bull did. I think there's a lot to be said for how they go to market. I would almost argue now not every brand needs to have field marketing. There's other ways to go to market. I think at the end of the day, like, what Red Bull did well was that one couple of things I took away from Red Bull was this: be genuine. Consumers know bullshit when they see it, and they also know premium value when they see it. They know it. They know it. Don't bullshit it. Just be real, right? But also, can you be genuine and also use that as an advantage to do the unexpected? Because if you're genuine in your approach and you do something that's unexpected, you create what I call these wow moments, right? These or at Red Bull we call them WOM, word of mouth moments, right? And at the end of the day, we would do things to create word of mouth. Love or hate Red Bull was an okay thing. When you think of energy, it's positive and negative. It's okay if certain people don't like you. What's also interesting is it's not always about the the coolest and the hippest if you're really trying to drive consumption. It's creating something of value and then delivering it in unique ways to people day in, day out, because it's way cool, like to have all these sexy, sports oriented, amazing, videos and all these things. I mean, Red Bull puts out some of the best content in the world. It is absolutely mesmerizing. I don't drink the brand day in, day out like I used to, but I sure as heck consume the media day in, day out because it is still some of the best in the world. And you could almost argue that Red Bull is almost more of a media agency now than it is just a beverage brand. But it's still a lifestyle brand. It's a brand that people connect with and share with. I think the one thing to realize is that even though a brand was built out of a can, an 8.3 ounce can, single flavor, they had one product when I was selling Red Bull. It was a 12 pack of Red Bull. 12 pack, 8.3 ounce cans of Red Bull. That's how we sold it. Simple. Nothing crazy. I mean, I think we got crazier when we brought in a 24 pack. Woo! Look out! But and then we went sugar free, and people were like, oh my gosh, right? But like the thing is, it was all about connecting with consumers. And when you're building consumption and you've got this like image, right? So it's a balance, a delicate balance at times between image building and consumer collecting. Is kind of how we had referred to it, right? But at the end of the day, it's taking that cool concept and allowing the every man to, and every woman and every person to participate, right? Regardless of what they love to do. And what was really cool was the same way that you make an athlete's day by giving them wings and allowing them to fly, right? And have their energy to focus their body and mind is the same way that a construction worker, which was one of our top demographics, believe it or not, the same way that that construction worker, someone stops with a silly car with a can on the back of the car, stops, hands them an ice cold Red Bull at 2 p.m. and work their butts off all day. And it's like, hey, I hope you have a great day. Enjoy. That stuff was amazing. Like, we would get people talking about it and sharing it and caring. We did all these different programs nationwide, but so how did Red Bull do that? Right? Because you specifically talked about the car, right? The car was just one portion of the
Right, of
total
course. That's just what's
Red Bull
memorable.
marketing mix, right? So like we had a combination of influencer or opinion leader marketing, and then we also had consumption building activities, right? And so like, what did Red Bull do well to scale a field marketing organization? Well, first of all, Red Bull's marketing. They look at everything as marketing. So people today say, oh, sales and marketing. No, it's just marketing. And we sell product, but we are all about how we bring that product to market. Right? Whether you're on a self-proclaimed sales front or a marketing front or operations front, it's all marketing. Everybody's a marketer in the Red Bull organization, right? But the unique thing about that is because everybody's got the mind of a marketer, they really focused on unifying their brand message. Early days was brand training after brand training after brand training. You were indoctrinated as a brand leader into the organization. And brand leaders weren't just marketers. Brand leaders were sales, traditionally today called salespeople, traditionally called operations people. Everybody was a part of the brand marketing. And the reason we were trying to unify one message.
Yeah.
Right? And we were trying to create great stewards of Red Bull to support the overall growth. And we would provide these employees or owners of the brand tremendous resources to go out and share and be that brand evangelist, if you would, in their region.
Yeah.
And indoctrinate others into the Red Bull family. And we got really good at sharing this both locally, regionally, nationally. And it had little to do with the mix. Like the marketing mix was just some of the tools that we used.
Right.
But it all started and ended with one unified message. And that one unified message was all about the history, the story, how we brought things to life and our why, right? Really giving people wings, to help with their body and mind, right?
Yep.
When you think about that message, it's still here today. And it was done in different ways, right? So you had this polarizing effect going on. You see these even today. I think I saw one of the early Red Bull commercials that they just re-released for, I think it was around college football playoff, but it was like, it was so interesting, right? It's this fuzzy bunny like commercial, where the devil's talking about something and he's like got a fork and whatever. But it's interesting, right? Because it's very opposite of Lindsey Vonns and the athletes that you're going to see this Olympics. But they're actually joined through this element of surprise and delight. The way that they bring this to life is in the body and mind, right? So when you see some of these athletes, some of the best the best athletes in the world are wearing Red Bull stuff.
Yep.
I know. Yeah, you can say, oh, the monster guys, this and that, and it's one big fight at the top, right? But I'll tell you what, I'm a Red Bull guy. I'll tell you what, we would seek out the best athletes.
Totally.
And we would create this message that got unified. We would empower great people to share that message around the communities, but then we would arm them, right? We would arm them with ownership. They didn't necessarily own the brand. It was owned by one person. Well, a couple people, Dietrich and his partner, at the time, but we allowed people to own it in their region. And that regionality made it even more powerful, right? Now, the trick with this is like, when you see things winning, you share things with others, right?
Right.
And so when you say, hey, look, we're going to go hire 50, field marketing people, then we're going to go hire 50 field sales trade marketing people, and we're going to go hire 50 on-premise marketing people, call them salespeople, whatever, but now they call them salespeople. But you're talking about bar nightclub marketing, you're talking about full trade distribution and marketing and full field marketing. People are going to think you're nuts. But we didn't, the way it was explained to me is like, because I asked, like, why would you bring on so many stinking people? And they basically are like, look, the US is different. They spent from 1987 to 1997, 10 years, and they hadn't entered the United States yet.
Wow.
And they came to the States in 97 and 98. You could almost say they kind of failed. The first CEO left. And then they said, look, we're going to double down on the investment. And, the way it was explained to me was like this. We divided up the country into fifths. And we said, what happens if each one of these regions within the next 5 years does $250 million in business? We'd be a multi-billion-dollar brand. And I'll tell you what, they never looked back. But in order to get there, it wasn't just about the marketing mix, right? It's this balance between consumption and influence, yes. But it was really about how they delivered that message to consumers in unexpected ways, right? You have these flying day competitions where the everyday person can be their own pilot and build their own flying machine. And oh, by the way, you got to huck it off of a 30, 40-foot freaking pier and hope that you get the longest flight. Fun as all heck, by the way. Flugtag is one of the best events they've got.
It's so awesome.
So fun. But then, they balance it with, some of these world-class racers in F1 and these, guys doing daredevilish stuff in wingsuits. And it's like mind-blowing stuff. But that's exactly it, right? Because some of it is meant to blow your mind.
Totally.
Because it's mind and body, right?
Yeah.
So everything that Red Bull does is really interesting. Very, very fortunate to have learned marketing from them. Very fortunate to have played a little part here in the US. Still absolutely love it. Even though I don't drink it every day now, getting older, passing 50. But, it's pretty amazing to see what has transpired.
I totally agree with that. Shifting gears a little bit, I think it was in 2019, Novamex did that roll up where they kind of rolled up C2O, Steaz, and I think a few of those other brands. Just first off, just at a high level, what was kind of like the original kind of thought process of the company and kind of why I feel like it made sense to group these three brands together, few brands together?
Yeah, I mean, I think to understand that, you have to understand Novamex was built on partnerships. They are such great people with just amazing business skills that know how to partner with brands, but also know where there's an opportunity and areas to learn. And, we had a partnership with Novamex on the C2O side. That's where I started with Novamex, was on the C2O team, and C2O is an integration with Novamex. They had also had Steaz, organic iced tea, which was part of the group as well. And, Novamex is really interested in developing brands, right? And bringing them to market day in, day out. They've done Jarritos. They also had a big play in Cholula and some of these other brands over the history of the company. So we formed Naturals, or Nova Naturals, if you would, as a division of Novamex, really to put a focus on the natural products that we had. We had some great people. We've done some pretty interesting things. When you have multiple brands, you can't have multiple people calling on the same customers, and it just made perfect sense for us to consolidated into a team of people that are highly focused on natural, and then could also be that voice of natural and education on natural and the brands
Yeah.
to the greater company as well. So it's a fun matrix to work in. It's not easy, but it's totally different, and very fortunate to be a part of this group. We formed Nova Naturals about 5 years ago, and we're continuing to grow our brands and are continuing to grow our share of the marketplace. We have some great team members, and we integrate with the great team members on total Novamex side too, which is awesome. So we're kind of that natural focus group, but then we also steer our brands across the general market as well from a natural perspective. So it's a fun time. It's not easy, but it's very different.
Yeah, totally. You have somewhat of a, might call it a shared services approach, where you've got kind of a centralized team that supports, C2O and Steaz and, the brands kind of together. I'm just kind of curious in terms of how does that kind of work in practice on a day-to-day basis? And how do you kind of, align around resources when there's a bunch of competing priorities across these multiple brands?
Yeah, look, I mean, nothing's perfect, right? I'm an optimist, so like always trying to find the opportunity within the synergies and white space. I'm also an entrepreneur, so like I have an entrepreneurial mindset, and I love looking at how we can create value from shared relationships. So like when we look at Nova Naturals and kind of how we balance it between C2O and Steaz, like it's no easy feat. Like let me just say, like it's not perfect, but we did and have been able to find some really cool synergies for the brands to help bring them to market. I think that the trick is, people say, well, how do you make that work? And kind of just like what you said, it's like the trick is to keep it simple and
Yeah.
look for the value that you can deliver for your organization without overcomplicating things. Because the minute you start overcomplicating things, it just becomes a quagmire, right? So like we've really tried to keep things as simple as we possibly can, but also deliver, the value that we can. And we look for synergies across both, C2O and Steaz to drive total value for the organization. And it comes in the form of different things. I can't give away all of our little secrets. There's a little bit of
Sure.
secret sauce in there. I'm just going to say it. But and it's a route less traveled, right? But I think at the end of the day, really focusing on um, opportunity and really figuring out as a group what your shared goals are so that
Yeah,
you can deliver maximum value to all the different parties involved.
totally.
And we're constantly aligning teams internally to make sure everyone is working towards those set goals, right? It's not easy, but and we're constantly setting and reprioritizing different things, but we do have quarterlies and annuals that we're working towards, and those are our goalposts that we're marching towards, right? So we just continue to evolve our teams and develop them as groups. So it's not easy, but it also just helps us rationalize what's important to all of us, right? So we
Yeah.
get everyone aligned on what's important for the business, and then we start taking everyone in that direction, and we ask them to participate. It's not just a directive; it is a active participation. So really, really cool to be a part of this team that has so many just brilliant minds working on some of these cool projects that we're trying to steer and develop our brands into as far as business drivers to really continue to elevate Nova Naturals and build out the greater business. There's no year that's exactly the same here, which is great. So it's a fun place to work. I get to work with great people, and we get to do some cool stuff.
Totally. Specifically on the Steaz brand, so I think the Nova Natural acquired in 2016. Then I think over time, I think what I've heard you read, I think you did an interview or two or something along those lines. And I heard you say over time, the brand has lost its way a bit in terms of the core mission and focus, and then which ultimately led to a recent decision to go through a pretty significant kind of overhaul from both a brand and I think formulation perspective as well. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe just from at a high level, the question of why, what led the decision to go through this this pretty big initiative and this pretty big overhaul in the first place?
Well, the why is the why. Let me just say that, Adam. So like, I think the piece of this is like, why would you do something? Well, first of all, let me just say, I don't think it was as massive as maybe you're making it out to be. It was
Okay,
pretty
fair
big.
enough.
It
I'm,
was
I'm over
important.
dramatizing
No,
it.
no, but I think what I would refer to it as is a little bit more of a refinement, right? We had Steaz was originally created by Eric and Steven, Eric Chanell, Steven Kessler, and it passed into Nestle, and then it ended up in Novamex, and there were different teams along the way that were managing it, and my team wasn't necessarily involved with it. We were really on the C2O side for a bit. And anytime you have multiple people working on multiple things, there can be brain drain, and there can also be drift from what the original intention was. So the team and I started to see some of this. Like, we were asking the question of why. Why Steaz? Why is Steaz important? What is important as well, but why is more important for that what than anything else. And really, what we came down to was we were missing something. There's something that occurred in the translation of passing down, the brand. It wasn't fully connecting the way that it should or could. And a lot of people had different views on the brand. And so we did something non-traditional. We actually went back to the founders. We happened to bump into Steven Kessler at Expo West a couple years back. Great guy. And, he kicked it off and hit it off with Adam Biggs. And little do you know, like, Eric Chanell and Steven and I and Adam end up on a call with Ron Green, who's our CEO. And we're just talking this through of like, we think we're missing something, and help us understand the original why for this brand. And if you were to launch Steaz today, what would it be? What would it look like? And that was the question. We started asking questions, right? Because you don't know until you start asking those hard questions of like, what are we missing? And we had to take it was a humbling experience, because like, we had just rebranded this probably 3 years prior, and we were looking at this and like, something's missing, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And really what it was is, getting the founding fathers, if you would, in this case, back into the brand to understand, hey guys, help us understand your genesis. Help us understand what Steaz would look like today. Help us understand the difference in what you're trying to make with Steaz when you originally created it, and how it would translate into today. And you know what? Steaz was the first organic brand, not just tea brand, first organic brand, from what Eric and Steven were telling us. Wow. Is the first organic brand, USDA organic brand, to come off the line. And like, they had to take it through that process, and their co-packer partnered with them to get their first USDA organic certified logo. Now, it's not just a logo. It's because what was important to them was the farmers. What was important to them was the sourcing. What was important to them was making a difference and having a product that actually had an impact on this world in a positive manner. What was important to them, right? Today, it's interesting. They took the learnings from Steaz and developed them into these 5 Ps for their process now, right? So Steaz originally had 3 Ps: people, product, planet, right? Really, really cool. But they're also focused on, there's 2 additional ones, right? And those 2 additional ones were really to help them connect with consumers. And it's all about prosperity, right? And creating positivity within a product, and allowing people to participate in the prosperity of prosperity isn't just creating a product that makes money. Prosperity is everyone that comes in contact with that brand benefits.
Yeah.
from the sourcing to the planet, to the people, to the, the consumers, and everyone that gets to participate now in Steaz, because Steaz now is the first regenerative organic certified tea to hit the market in the US, ready to drink tea. There's loose leaf tea out there, but ready to drink bottled tea, Steaz is the first. And the premise was to get back to the why of what we would call doing good by brewing good, making an impact with every can of Steaz that we manufacture, sell, and add value to people's lives. And so we started reworking on how do we bring that to life. And so we started looking at, okay, guys, could we partner with you? And we partnered with their agency then, Beyond Brands, on helping us to bring Eric and Stephen back into this a bit and to understand the why. And we asked hard questions, and we listened some more and got some consumer feedback and started talking through, different things along the way of what was missed where and when, and how we even had a founders day where we got to meet Eric and Stephen and hear all of their stories from Genesis. And it was like an unlocking for our team of wow. And we had no idea what we had missed. And then we went to work, we started working with them on sourcing regenerative organic tea. Cause when Steaz was placed into Nova Naturals, we were buying tea from a tea broker. We were, which isn't bad. It was fair trade. It was organic. It was quality tea, but we didn't have a relationship with our farmers.
Right.
We didn't have a full understanding of the supply chain. We didn't have the full understanding of the impact that the supply chain could have. We also didn't have a real give back in the form of which we have now, which is 1% for the planet. We actually have 1% for the planet on there, not just because it's a cool badge. We have it on there because it makes an impact. It forces us to every year ask the question of how are we going to create a better planet? How are we going to create an impact on the people around us and create strategies to deliver upon that? So I'm happy to say, with our tea provider now, Wild Orchard, we're partnering with them on farmer education programs. We're partnering with them on other ways to educate both internal and external customers. We're figuring out other ways. We're also partnering with Whole Foods and other core natural retailers, Sprouts, etc., on impact programs where we can, and trying to give back in ways that create conversations around regenerative organic certification, because regenerative organic is different. It's not just organic. It's actually creating a regeneration of the land. So you've heard the term sustainability. Sustainability really just means we're not doing any harm.
Right.
It's sustainable. Well, you didn't do any harm, but you didn't help anything either. Regenerative organic is we're not just sustainable, we're actually putting in practices that make the land better than where it was before. We're putting in systems that ensure animals and farmers alike that care for the crops and care for the land are treated fairly and treated in humane ways and provided fair wages. In this case, it's direct trade. So it's even better than fair trade. We know who is receiving it. We know how to benefit them. We've created a long-term supply partnership with Wild Orchard and the team to develop a regenerative organic certified tea and bring it out in the form of Steaz to do good for the world. Yep. So it's not just doing good, but we're brewing good and we're doing good and we're putting it all in a can for people to participate. And we're trying to bring the value to those consumers day in, day out. So pretty exciting, man. It's the road less traveled, but probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in marketing.
I think that's definitely going to resonate with consumers too. I think it's going to show through.
Yeah, it's different, man. A lot of different things we had to do with it, looking at it from a consumer perspective, what was going to stand out on shelf, all your classic marketing stuff. But at the end of the day, getting the base right is the most important.
On that topic, I guess, let's just say I was a brand leader at a pretty fast growing, fairly established CPG brand, like
Sure.
let's just say C2O water, but both of them are very well established. And I told you, hey, I'm considering a packaging refresh. What kind of questions might you ask me to just help me understand, is a packaging refresh even the right strategy in the first place?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Okay, like there's a lot of ways to extrapolate, like you know, someone who's coming to that decision and work through all the different questions. But I think for me, I would start with why. It sounds simple, everyone's like, oh, Simon Sinek, this and that. Why? But I'll tell you what, if you get your why right, it can really help you unlock the reasoning behind all the other moves that you're going to make.
Yeah.
I don't think people give him enough credit on that book of why, because it really is that genesis. But it's so theory and sometimes out there for people to go, well, why? And like, why are you considering this? What's causing you to believe that you need to make this change?
Yeah.
Who
Totally.
who are your consumers, and are they the ones that are telling you that you need to make this change?
Yeah.
You
It's
know, how do you validate it?
yeah, totally. That's a great point. Especially for an established brand, like let's just use, Steez as an example. Like, how did you obviously you felt like there were some things that work needed to be done, but obviously it's a brand that's well established. It definitely has some, has a lot of loyal fans. And how did you kind of think about balancing the need for a fresh look and kind of communicating, some of the changes, or again, regenerative, organic, and all that kind of stuff, and all the other kind of refresh messaging versus keeping some of the familiar legacy brand elements for those existing customers? They'll recognize it right away. It still resonates with them. Also, it's not so different than when they're go to the grocery store the next time. They actually can immediately still recognize it on the shelf and make sure they don't walk right by it. That makes sense.
Yeah, look, Steez is a 24, almost 25-year-old tea brand. It was the first
Right.
organic tea brand. How do you as a marketing person and marketing team and business team not mess it up?
Yeah. Right.
Because like, look, it's tricky and nothing's perfect. How did we come to this conclusion? I think when we started to see that, when we made an initial change in 2021, 2022, we came out and like we were handed a brand that was from this previous team that was kind of all over the board. It was like it was a little messy, like the consistency on the reasoning behind why they ended up here and how they ended up here. We also began looking at the sourcing and like, why are we going through a broker when we should be knowing who our farmers are? Why are we? So these are all whys, right? Why are we, trying to talk planet if we don't have a true initiative that gives back into the health of the planet? Why are we, you know, trying to create energy drinks and energy shots and all these other things? Why are we trying to do that? And it's challenging, right? Because you have so many different opinions.
Yeah.
And so for us, we were just at that time, we thought, I'll be honest, there was a little bit of an ego. Like we were trying to figure it out and like we thought we knew. And we're like, well, we have we had an energy SKU, we had a green tea SKU, we had plans for a yerba mate because yerba mate was on fire. We're a tea company, we got to be in that
Yeah.
in that business. And what we learned was we were all wrong. Our yerba mate was good, tasted great, guayaki was great, but what we didn't realize before this was when we talked to Eric and Steven, did you know, Mike, that Steaz used to have strategic partnerships with Guayaki and also Sambazon to not market and against each other, but to lift each other up? No, didn't know that. Why? Why? The why was because all of us were aligned around doing better for the planet. And we had decided if we're going to create a movement, We're not going to attack each other. We're going to go after the marketplace. I was like, wow. Right? Mic drop. So like asking yourselves why some of these things could have helped us. Also, we created Steaz, Mike and team. It's not just Mike thing, but you're talking to me. They told me we created Steaz as a green tea. Why are we not just green tea? And I couldn't answer that question. Right. So like we started looking at the whys, and they were challenging us and we were challenging them, and we were like, what's important? The other thing was on our previous, I got a can here, but on our previous can, we had this, I don't know if you can see it.
Hold it. Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, so the flower of life here is cut off. The question Eric and Stephen asked is, why did you cut off that flower of life? Because the flower of life is a regenerative flower. The flower of life is not to be cut off, or else you cut off its life force. The flower of life is a continuous design speaking to the regenerative qualities of the green tea. Like these are some of the nuances in here that I'm using to explain. If we had known these things, we probably would not have ended up in this better mousetrap, if you would, that we were going to create. We would have anchored back into our why. And our why was so that the brand could have purpose. But even before my team got our hands on the brand, the sourcing had changed and the why on the sourcing had changed. And it had come a cost thing. And why on this over that had changed, like as far as different other ingredients that were used. Oh, because they were trendy. No, we're not trying to tap into trends. We're trying to create something of value. And it's very different. And you create something of value by understanding who you are. And sometimes it's a refining process in who you are. So if you're that person out there that is considering that rebrand, ask yourself the question, why do I want to do this? What value is my brand creating today for my consumer? Why would I want to change it? Why did I get into this business? And what did consumers gravitate towards? Why did they gravitate towards me? Why do they love my brand? For those who don't love your brand, why do you hate my brand so much? Sometimes those are the best questions. I'd rather have someone who's a lover or a fighter, but the plain old vanilla people, come on. We don't want, not that I don't want you. It's just, I want people with opinions. Like, help me understand, right? Because at the end of the day, our why has to mean something. And for the founders and owner teams out there, because like I know, Adam, you're dealing with folks that are like startup all the way to large CPG, but like for that startup group, understand why you're doing something, understand why it's valuable to you, understand why it's valuable to the people that you're delivering it to. Deliver it genuine and look for ways that you can improve it to add more value to their lives without compromising on your values. Right?
Totally. Totally.
For those who are big CPG that are worried about, how do I get to this? Keep asking.
Yeah.
Go back to, why did this happen? What was the genesis story? Why were they thinking this way at the time? How did we end up in this solution? Why were we dealing with all these different elements? There's an explanation for some of this. The other thing, if you've got an older even brand that you're considering, do some consumer testing. There's some great groups out there. Used to be, you'd have to be to do an in-home usage test. You had to be a part of a big brand, and it was really costly. There's some really like smart, tactical, practical ways to go out and do it, whether it's through like a formalized service like Highlight, or taking your product into samplings. It was interesting. I just saw an article on Ben Stiller in Whole Foods, and he's sampling at Whole Foods. And I know totally some of it is an entertainment thing, and a big thing there for entertaining, but it's still really interesting. And yes, it's getting the word out because he's a big celebrity, but it's still really interesting. If Ben really wants to understand why consumers, he's standing right there. There's no better place as an owner to sit at a demo table and learn about your brand and how it connects to help you refine your why.
Totally.
Product market fit is so important today. And whether you realize it or not, that's what you're doing as a demo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to say, like, on that topic of product market fit.
Yeah.
Prior to Nova Naturals, you led marketing at Neuro Brands. And I guess for those that don't remember this brand, it was really I've remembered say it's like one of the first, if not the first, like really functional beverage brands.
Yeah.
It resonated a lot, caught a lot of attention. I think it was like growing super quickly for a while. Like looking back now, it feels the brand is a bit ahead of its time. Obviously now functional beverages is all the rage. I'm kind of curious, like what's your take on the kind of the functional beverage category today? And if assuming you agree, if not, you can also tell me you disagree, why it may have just been a bit too early for Neuro Brands, and I don't know, anything else that jumps out in this vein.
It's so interesting. I was just telling a friend of mine the other night that I worked at Neuro with, I was like, man, I really felt like Neuro was ahead of its time. He's like,
yeah,
man, I totally believe that and see it. It's so interesting, right? I was just at BevNet Live last month in December, and there's all kinds of like functional products out, and they're not just looking at energy, they're looking at all types of function, even within the day part. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost like the revolution is coming back. You know what I mean? It's like, we all have those nostalgic things from our childhood that now all of a sudden our kids, I have 5 kids, they're coming back. I'm like, no way, that's back, right? Like, and I felt like that with Neuro, right? Because Neuro was circa 2012. In my mind, it was the first functional wellness product out there.
Yeah.
It was really and we were trying to figure out how to brand it. We ended up calling it, if you remember at the time, iPhone was huge. iPhone had just come out with all the little apps and all the little gizmos and gadgets. And regardless, there was an app for that.
Yep.
Do you remember that? There was an app for that. So we started to look at this, cultural piece, and we started building a campaign around Neuro being this operating system for life, because we were trying to explain Neuro drinks, Neuro basically meaning an impact on your mind, right? And a drink that you could drink. And it had different day parts. Like we had a Neurosonic which was like our energy SKU, which was with L-theanine. So caffeine and L-theanine, we learned that it would give you a heightened response and, not allow you to crash. It was really a lower calorie, 30 calories compared to Red Bull, which was 80. And we were in a 16 ounce and Red Bull was an 8 ounce. So, I mean, you figure it out, it's like 15 calories, 15 to 25 calories on average per SKU versus 80 to 120. Right. I mean, it was ridiculous. Right. Yeah. And it was better and it came in a sexy bottle, right? Sure. People say, oh, it looked like shampoo, but you know what? It broke at the shelf. Yeah. It broke people's eyes at the shelf. You knew exactly where it was. And we put it into, this beautiful, elegant bottle with an overcap. It was not cheap to make. Neuro was an expensive brand to produce. But you know what? It was all about delivering value. And so we came up with this idea of Neuro drinks, the operating system for life. So we had Neurosonic, then we had Neuro Bliss. Neuro Bliss was really a lower caffeine beverage. If zero caffeine is where it eventually went, zero caffeine, and it had L-theanine in it too. And what we learned was L-theanine without as much caffeine would actually mellow you out a little bit, make you a little bit more stress reliever, right? So that was kind of the temperaments that we had. We also had a Neuro Sleep, right? Which was first melatonin beverage. And then we had Neuro Sun, which was, I think it was 3,000 milligrams, I think it was, of vitamin D. Mm-hmm. So, real importance of vitamin D. So this idea of, you're not going to get the the blues during winter, right? Or being indoors all the time because you can have your vitamin D because vitamin D deficiency is great.
Yep.
And then there was Neuro Aqua and, a couple of our explicit
Neurogasm.
products. We had the infamous Neurogasm, which our founder was absolutely, interestingly enough, Neurogasm, top flavor, right?
Interesting.
Top flavor ranked by consumers, always ranked high on top flavor.
Interesting.
Lowest distribution by percentage point of ACV. Why? Because of the name.
Right.
The minute we changed the name to Neuro Passion, the SKU exploded on the scene and went into Kroger and went into a bunch of other retailers. Our founder, she wanted it back at Gasm, so they changed it again. And I think eventually after I had left, they changed it back, but never really caught wind. But it did create notoriety for the brand.
Yeah.
And Neuro Drinks was interesting is we had all these functional day parts, and we would say, like, regardless of your mood or mind state, there's a neuro for that, right? So the same way that there's an app for that, there's a neuro for that, because the neuro was, if you would think about it this way, the operating system for life. You could have something for energy, for hydration, for all these different day parts. The challenge with neuro was how do you package it up into a form and function that consumers could easily gravitate towards and find.
Right.
I think when you go to at shelf today, it's interesting. Like at BevNet, I saw a lot of brands trying to break into multifunctionality. And multifunctionality is really interesting. However, it becomes a communication quagmire, and you have to really figure out how you're going to arm and develop your team. I also think, like, at the time when we were rolling out Neuro, when I started with Neuro, we were in 5 states. Within a year and a half of being there, we rolled it out with DPSG and Pepsi nationwide. We got like close to 35,000 points of distribution that year. It was an unbelievable year. We positioned the brand. It was a breakout brand by BevNet. Like it was definitely something that was taking the communities and field by storm.
Yeah.
I think really what was interesting about it was we had the right communication mix. It was kind of Red Bull strategy. We had a right communication mix. We understood how to communicate the brand. We had strong branding at shelf and also beyond shelf in media. And then what we did was we regionalized it with our core retailers as they rolled it out nationwide in an integrated media campaign. And that really helped to drive it. That really, really helped to drive it. And we got a lot of traction and consumption right away. Definitely, but I think like anything, you have challenges. You have challenges sometimes with ownership. You have challenges sometimes with investment. You have challenges on where's the long-term viability for where this is going. And they wanted to go in one direction, and some of our team didn't want to go in that direction. So, a few of them left. But Neuro was a great place to work, though, when we were all there. It was a tremendous product. Got nothing but great things to say about that team. It's unfortunate to see how it's kind of changed over the years, but I think the challenge has been how do you communicate the multifunction of the brand? And that's really, I think, where you've seen the decline. Like when we had this operating system for life and we were moving in this direction, we could encapsulate all the values of the product into one. And we were having traction because consumers could easily relate this. If I need this, I get that neuro. If I need this, I get that neuro. And as soon as you took the pedal off the metal and began just focusing on individual SKUs, people began to get lost in the mix of, oh, I thought this was a sleep product, or I thought this was an energy product, or, then there's consumer confusion. And I think it's hard at times to recover from that. I also think there's things that have taken place in the grander market, right? Like you've seen plastics change, right? So, for a long time, Neuro was still in that elegant hourglass shaped bottle. extremely recyclable. They were trying to make it an rPET or whatever, improve it. Just hard to do. But I think consumers really prefer cans at times. Aluminum and glass are now on the upswing, right? It's not easy to do as a beverage manufacturer. Single-use plastics are, finding a harder place to market themselves these days. But I mean, you still have large channels that still market it. It's just consumer trends are changing. So
Yeah,
how do
for
you
sure.
keep up with the brand, and how do you keep up with the trends, right? You also have functional dosability now, in that it's not just about beverages. You've got people that are taking powders and dosing their lifestyle. So you have a big shift that's occurred just within those 5 to 7 years that has, whether you like it or not, competed with your overall share of mouth. So melatonin's a lot more readily available and easy to use in gummies, right? You're seeing energy sticks with lower calories and things that can be taken on the go. So it's really interesting to kind of see a brand that I think was at the forefront. Maybe they lost their luster a little bit, but when I was there, that brand was humming, and I'm proud to say that the team that we had around it and the ownership that was in place was great in really helping us kind of break through in the marketplace.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it was a great journey. Last question for you, Mike.
Yeah, man.
Pick one. Let you pick either one. If you had to pick one specific brand you've been just kind of following for fun, or as it piques your interest, or one kind of specific trend in just CPG in general that's kind of piqued your interest. I'll let you pick one. And yeah, curious what comes to mind first.
Man, it's so hard to choose. I mean, it's hard to ignore the large macro categories, right? When you start looking at protein, like the protein revolution that is taking place today, I mean, it is nuts. I remember, I was at Proyo, high protein ice cream, which became Swell Foods, and I was talking with executive at Starbucks. She was one of the senior vice presidents. Bumped into her actually at one of the stores here in Southern California. And she's like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I do product marketing. You guys need more protein in your stores." And at the time she's like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I do a high protein ice cream." But I was telling her, I was like, it's hard to find items in your stores. You need, like, looking at their assortment at that time, this is probably 2014, 2015. It was like, look, you need more nuts. You've got opportunities here for like higher protein items. You could even sell like, and I was trying to sell some ice cream. Let's just be honest, high protein ice cream at that. But I think at the end of the day, it's really interesting to see today's environment, right? Of now, this is probably 10 to, gosh, maybe 12 years later. And what do you have? You have Starbucks claiming protein in all their beverages. I asked the guy that was serving me, I was like, has the protein really changed that much? He's like, we add some, concentrate, but most of it is protein that was already in the milk anyway. We're just claiming it. I was like,
Right.
you know, so like you really think of, but I think consumers are wise to some of this stuff. Let's not confuse ourselves, right? Let's not say that our Starbucks is super healthy. There's ways to order Starbucks that are healthy, but on
Sure.
average, like, come on, man. Like the protein revolution is just getting going. I got a lot of respect for the way that some of these protein brands are coming to market these days, like being like highly focused and really lasered in on their community online and
Yeah.
developing, customer sales, through online channels and key influencer and really, affiliate based marketing. So like there's some amazing stuff going on. I think there's some really cool brands out there that I've just loved and admired. So it's interesting, right? So like you see Vital Proteins and got sold, right? Like a few years back. But like what they're doing still in the marketplace for the larger acquiring company, like they're really pushing the limit a little bit more. You see Chomps has gone I remember Chomps came out in Trader Joe's. I saw it at Trader Joe's for the first time. And then I was like buying them up because I was on keto and like love the brand even to this day. But there's still some other ones, right? Like the competitive set has just gotten even better, right?
Yeah.
So like you start looking at the way that these large retailers are not just selling products, but they're developing products even on their own. Kirkland made a decision just to go and create their own meat stick now. Like they don't just go into categories just to go into categories. They're going in because there's a long-term value
Yeah.
and life changes that are occurring. But you also got the influx of GLP-1 and other things that are impacting protein sales because people need to keep the protein levels high, right? Or else they're going to lose some of that skeletal muscle and some of these other things. So it's not just, shooting it up and losing weight. That's a great thing, but people
Yeah.
are finding out that they need to still have a balanced diet, and higher protein is definitely a driver in those diets and trends. So it's one I'm continuing to watch. I'm really excited about what's coming out. It's always interesting to see the different channels and how they're looking at the items. I love some of the different fish items that are coming out, believe it or not, for people to maintain healthy protein levels, like whether that's through great brands like Fish Wife or some of these others
Yeah.
that are out there. I mean, there's some like really cool brands that aren't just protein powders, but they're really fit within a healthier lifestyle, even some of these Mediterranean diet lifestyles. So it's pretty interesting. And just, I'm a fan of what's going on in the market. I love
Totally.
to see people taking their health serious. I love to see people benefiting from high quality products. I love to deliver high quality products that offer consumers value to their lives. And so like my positioning in the market as Mike Fransz is a little bit different than most in that I love developing brands that really truly add that value to people.
Yeah.
It can support them over the long term of their health versus just putting a product on shelf and yeah, it's going to be really successful, but is that really where I want to be at the end of the day? When
Yeah.
I meet my maker, am I going to be proud of the products that I brought to market to support people's lives? That's the decision that I have.
I totally respect that. I definitely love that. But yeah, Mike, this has been awesome. So many great insights here. You give so much great experience in this space. What's the best place for people to follow along with you if they want to follow along with your expertise, and then best place to follow along with Steaz and C2O these days?
Yeah, you can follow along on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy, classic business channel. I'll hit different posts in there. You can follow me. Steaz and C2O, really easy to get at. We've got all the social on both of those brands. So, Instagram is just some beautiful ways that we bring the brands to life. There's a lot of other ways too. We're having fun with TikTok and some of these new creatives as well. So get at us. You can find both brands online, C2O, drinkc2o.com or drinksteaz.com. And, I'm on LinkedIn, Mike Fransz.
Perfect.
Appreciate you.
Awesome, Mike. It's been great. Appreciate the time. I think that's the pod.
Yeah, buddy. Good to see you.